So, welcome for another restorative session. We are working this evening with the idea of limits. I'm running into the limit of my technology. Like, my creativity seems really limitless right now. I have this wonderful flow of just somehow or another acquiring the things that I need to do the work that I'm doing, and I'm full of ideas and I'm full of motivation, and I've got lots of time. But then my limitation has come with like an upload speed with my modem or my router, or my technology is running out of memory, or I can't quite get the pixels on the camera to match the higher quality camera that I'm using over here. So I just kind of working with some of these limits, and it reminds me of some very lean times in my life. We all had our 20s when we were first getting out of the house and kind of struggling with how to be an adult and how to pay for all the things that being an adult requires. And we hit these limits. And what I found, or what I learned and discovered and learned to enjoy from those really lean times in my life, was the amount of creativity that comes from having sort of a cap on something. If you need to fix your sink, for example, but you don't have all the tools, but you have this tool, and you might be able to kind of wrangle this tool into this thing, then maybe you could use some plastic wrap and boom, it's fixed. It's kind of like that, where when a solution needs to come about, it will, and the limitations make it less easy to do, but it doesn't make it impossible. And in that space between not easy and impossible is this huge world of creativity and this amazing realm of fresh ideas and new ways of seeing things, new ways of doing things, new ways of using the tools that we have. So the idea, I guess, that I want to share with you guys is to embrace your limitations as inspirations. Rather than, and this again, of course, always returns back to Pratipakshabhavanam, one of my most favorite sutras. So Pratipakshabhavanam is that cultivating of the opposite point of view. So instead of being like, oh, I'm so limited by this brick wall that I'm hitting, think to yourself, wow, that wall looks kind of interesting to scale. I wonder how I can get up there. So it's kind of a little bit to what I like to call stealth punk. So punk is very, anti-establishment. It's anti-the man. But if you're too loud about your punkness, what ends up happening is you go to jail and you don't get to actually affect any change because your freedom has been taken from you. But if you can kind of flow with the world, but maintain your punk roots, maintain your freedom within, and make choices at a personal level that affect greater change. That's what I call stealth punk. It's like you have this limitation of how far you can speak out against the world as it is to make change. There's an amount that is necessary, that you have to say something, but there's this other part that if you go too far, it doesn't affect the change that you want. So in between those spaces is all that area for creativity. How do I reach the people that are unreachable in this moment? Or how do I solve this problem that I don't have the right tools on hand for? This also invites us into a space where we're able to create opportunities for other people in our lives, the people who love us, the people who want to support what we're doing. We create opportunities for them to share their gifts with us. So instead of thinking of it as I've hit my limit and now I need help, I don't want to put anybody out. I don't want to be reliant on other people. We have to humble ourselves enough to accept whatever help we're given, and also open ourselves to the idea that allowing someone to support us or allowing someone to give to us, especially if it's something they enjoy or are good at, it allows them an opportunity to shine. So this is just another way that finding a limit can spark a new way of thinking. It can actually kind of be a little spark for Pratipakshabhavanam, or seeing things differently. So there's like two steps, I think, in creating this change. The first one is to identify your limitations and bring clarity and awareness to where the edges of your ability or the edges of your resources or whatever the edges are that you're dealing with, whatever limit that is, finding those edges and bringing clarity and awareness to exactly where they are. Once we've done that and gotten really clear about it, we can begin to see them clearly enough to see past the limit. And sometimes it's not actually finding the solution that brings us past the limit. It's the ability to believe and to imagine going past the limit that actually gets us there, because then our mind starts to open. So with those two steps in mind, the identifying with clarity and awareness what our limitations are, and then cultivating the ability to see them so clearly that we can begin to see beyond them. Those are the two things that we're going to try to do tonight. So we're going to come into a Shavasana shape. Feel free to take flat back Shavasana, or if you would like to elevate, some part of your body or give yourself some support behind your head or underneath your knees or something, please feel free to take those options as well. And be diligent and aware about how you set the body up so that you can fully release your weight to the floor. Stillness and quiet. We want to be able to sort of drown out any distracting sounds or sensations by making ourselves as comfortable as possible lying down. And then start to feel where the very boundaries, borders, and edges of your physical form are. Feel the tips of the toes. Start to feel the soles of the feet and the heels. Feel where your heels are touching the floor or your mat. See if you can feel just the very outer layer of your skin. Feel where the front of your body is touching clothing or meeting with the open air around you. Feel the knuckles and the elbow on each arm touching the floor, and the very tips of the fingers gently kind of touching the air around your open palms. Bring a subtlety to your clarity of your very limits. See if you can feel the tips of your eyelashes. Maybe even the ends of your hair. Just feel where your body ends and the space around you begins. See if you can hold the boundary of your entire body at once, from the crown of your head to the tips of your toes, to your hips and your fingers. Then being very clear about the boundary between self and not self. See if you can imagine the heels, the backs, the calves, the sacrum, the shoulders, the knuckles, the back of the skull, all these places that are touching the floor. See if you can just kind of soften that boundary a little bit. See if you can allow it to blur, where the floor in its solidness and its stillness has begun to kind of leak its qualities into your body. And now you feel sort of mirrorship or oneness with the floor. We'll do the same with the front of the body. So again, just noticing what parts of the tops of your feet or knees, belly, face, what parts of you are touching clothing or open to the air around you. Then see if you can just feel the form of your body soften. And the very edges of your skin touching the air around you begin to blur and merge. Feel the spaciousness in the chest and the belly, maybe the space in the palms, the space between your toes and the space of the arches of your feet, and how it is taking on those qualities of the spacious room around you. And imagine past the very edges of your body, your senses traveling outside of the body. Just kind of bask in this heightened state of sensation, sort of becoming larger than the body. And from this very stable and still place, we're going to start to draw the arms so that they're reaching up and overhead, along the floor, stretching long from fingertips to toes. Still feeling our connection both to the floor and the space above us. Taking this centered place of alignment, crown, throat, heart, belly, and root. We're going to root down through the sacrum and then just walk the head and shoulders and legs and feet off to one side of the mat. You can choose either side to begin, whatever side feels natural for you. One ankle might cross over the other. One hand might encircle the other wrist. And we'll see what happens when we sort of feel pulled out of our centered place. And what happens when our hands and our feet move past that boundary. Our feet represent our ability to stand in the world. It represents our position or our place. And our hands represent our work and the way that we interact and manipulate the matter around us. What would happen if we could imagine our place in a different spot, metaphorically or actually? What would happen if we reached our hands outside of what we already knew to be our work or our ability to interact? Can we imagine ourselves past a limit of some kind in those realms? Notice that the heart here is still open and our sacrum is still grounded. Think about 3 or 4 more breaths here. When you're ready to come back to your centered place, there are lots of ways to do this. We can just walk head, feet, and shoulders back to center. You could also bend at the knees and recenter yourself. Knees might even come to chest for a moment, or knees might fall from side to side. And then we'll come back into our centered place where everything feels pretty natural. This is our flow state with feet and fingers kind of reaching away from each other, big open front body, and that alignment from crown to root. This is where we're comfortable. This is where we feel skilled. Now we're going to see what happens when we drag ourselves out of that box, seeing past our limits. See if we can imagine ourselves outside of that limitation or that realm. Again, one ankle may cross over the other if that feels relaxing for you, or if it helps you to see past a limit. Maybe one wrist is encircled by the other hand. Feel how we're leaning to one side, and yet it's the opposite side of our body that has gotten longer and bigger. So as we reach, as we begin to imagine ourselves outside of this limit, Even though it may seem asymmetrical, we often do have growth in other areas that come to us as a surprise. We might not even notice that growth until later. So again, noticing the pelvis anchored exactly where it was, heart still open, hands, which represent our work and our ability to interact, and our feet representing our position or our place in life or geographically or physically. Noticing what happens if we imagine ourselves past our edges. Can you feel any energy here flowing out past your fingertips or toes? Can you sense outside of the body? Just a few more breaths in this moon bend. And again, your choices about how to come back to center and how to neutralize. We can either come back to center long, or we can bend at the knees and reset the body. But take a moment to come back maybe into that long shape for just a few rounds of breath, coming back to a centered place where we feel ourselves kind of back in that flow. Then from here, if you haven't already, we're going to bend at the knees, bringing the soles of the feet to the floor. I'm going to recommend a block for this next pose and possibly a folded blanket. If you're using your folded blanket, it can just come to the right side of your mat, about where your knees are. And one of your blocks is going to come between the knees. Now, depending on your anatomy, your height, the width of your hips, things like that, different settings for the blocks might feel good. So experiment with different ways of placing the block between your knees. And we don't need like a Suzanne Summers like grip here. We want to find that sthira, sukham, asana, that balance of effort and ease, just enough effort to hold the block in place, just enough ease that we're not squeezing or tensing the muscles. Arms can come out to a T or some other kind of shoulder height, wide shape. And we'll just pause here for a moment, making sure we feel long between the back of the skull and the sacrum. Then just very softly, keeping that block between the knees, just barely let your feet float off the floor. Knees will come to hover right over your hips. Just kind of pause here. Notice how much effort is being applied in the belly. And then gently, we're going to strengthen our belly. So on our exhale, as the belly comes in, very slowly bring your knees to the right. Now, maybe your right knee is going to land on that little cushion that we have there with our blanket. Maybe the blanket doesn't feel good and you remove it. The block can stay. If it's uncomfortable to have the block there between your knees, you can also swap it out with the blanket or just, go without support there as well if that's comfortable. But ideally now the block is staying in place, not because of any effort at all, but just because of gravity from your top leg. Feel again here where the limit or boundary of how far your knees can come to the right, and how grounded you can stay on that right shoulder as your nose falls open to the left. Maybe we stretch the arms out a little wider. Maybe we can feel some energy flowing from our heart center down into the shoulders, past the elbows, past the wrists, cooling in the palms, and then sliding gently past the tips of your fingers. As you feel that energy flowing from heart out through the fingertips, how far away from your fingertips can you feel that movement, that aliveness, or that awareness of energy moving? As you soften into the twist, concentrate your energy on Feeling your way past the limits of your fingers, your knees, and your nose. The world is always changing form around us. And sometimes we feel ourselves twisted up in the movements of the world. We might call those the gunas, those forms. But when we let go and allow the moment to present its opportunity to us, we're never disappointed. And we begin to move past that limitation and into a sense of limitlessness. Limitlessness is another way of understanding our oneness with all things. Feel your energy moving past your body out into the room. Maybe your energy is streaming and kind of makes a long straight line out away from the body. Maybe it wafts or swirls more like incense smoke or water or steam. How do you feel your energy? And how does it respond, or what relationship does your energy have to the body and to the space around the body? Feel that flow for about 5 more breaths. When it's time to transition, see if you can maintain your awareness of that flow of energy and then move the knees back to center, nose back upright. Maybe the feet touch down for a moment to reset your spine, but keep staying connected to that flow out through the fingertips, up and out through the crown, out through the toes, the nose, and the knees. Feel how the directional change of the body might have shifted that flow of energy. Here's our natural state again. We're in neutral. Softly let your feet float off the floor again, keeping just a gentle hold on that block between your knees. If you're using that blanket, maybe it falls to the other side of your mat now. And then again, as slowly as you can, on an exhale, start to pull the knees over to the left. As you find your way there, soften, let go, release all effort, ground both shoulders and let your nose fall open to the right. Feel the turning of the world around you. Maybe you hear some ambient noise in your home or outside of your home. Maybe you feel that energy flowing from your heart still, out through the arms, into the hands, out through the fingertips. What shape does it make? What color is it? How does it flow? What are its qualities? And what relationship do those qualities have with the space of your body and the space around your body? Feel the very limit of your being and imagine your senses out past them. We spoke about bringing clarity and awareness to our limitations. Ideally, we've been at this for a little while now in our practice tonight. Maybe we can feel the exact dimensions of our physical form. Maybe with eyes closed, just by listening, we can also feel the dimensions of the space that we're in. Notice where sound is different. There's curtains or a piece of furniture that bounces the sound differently than the walls or the floor. Imagine a level of detail and of intimacy, of devoted attention. but out past the edges of what you consider normally yourself. Notice how this fuels your creativity. How detailed the image and sensations in your mind are to the world that's moving all around you, even as you are still. Let this twist be you flowing with that movement of the world. Saying yes to everything. Looking around you for the richness of the abundance of resources, even if they weren't the resources you planned to have. Feel an abundance of energy and inspiration flowing into your heart, and how that is the energy that's coming out through the hands and the fingertips. Another 5 or so rounds of breath here. And we're going to look at the limits of our breath. So start to inhale your breath in to the maximum capacity that your body can hold. Then see if you can just sip in a tiny bit more air before releasing completely. When you think you have all the air out of your body on your exhale, see if you can pull the diaphragm in just a little bit more and let a little bit more out. So for these last few rounds of breath, push past the limits of your breathing just by imagining. When it's time to come out of your shape, stay attuned or reshift your attention back to that flow of energy from the heart out through the hands, out through the tip of the nose, the crown of the head, and the knees. And stay connected to those flows as you exhale and draw your knees back to center. Notice how the shift in the body has an sort of echo effect on the shift of your energy. Your block between your knees can be set aside for the moment, and feel free to take several rounds of breath here in neutral, either in stillness or finding some movements to help you feel neutralized. Then eventually you'll roll to one side, and we'll press our way up to seated so we can arrange our props for our next pose. We talked about in our last pose about finding the edge of our breath and feeling the openness in the front body and how that connects to the spaciousness in the room around us. We are going to take a bound angle shape. It's a familiar pose, but I want to offer you some different options on how you take that shape. So traditionally, feet are together, knees are open. Sometimes blocks are used underneath the knees. That's an option you can take. We might reserve our blocks for our back support, however, in which case you can use one of your blankets to support your knees by making a little roll, setting it on top of your feet, pulling it underneath, so some kind of support for your knees. And then traditionally, again, when we take a supine bound angle shape, we often will use our bolster to support the spine. There are 2 ways you can do that. One is long ways, so that as you lean back, your head is supported. Another way is to turn the bolster the opposite direction, perpendicular to that, and either allowing the head to rest on the floor, or if it doesn't reach, using one of your blocks. This also opens the throat. Then your third option for spinal support is to use your 2 blocks, one for your head and one for the bottom of your ribs. So feel free to experiment. If the first prop setup you use doesn't feel awesome, feel free to try something else. And once you find your open heart shape, feel all of the openness. Feel the space, even if your feet are touching, between the 2 arches of your feet. Feel openness in the hips as the leg bones sort of turn outward in the hip sockets. Feel space between the pubic bone and the bottom of your ribs for your breath to flow, for your belly to be open and broad. Feel the shoulders, the points of the shoulders kind of pointing away from each other. And rather than pointing up at the ceiling, maybe pointing out to the sides. Feel that spaciousness between the collarbones. See if by relaxing any effort or tension in the body, you can push past the limits of that openness by opening a little bit more, not through effort, but through letting go. Through accepting the shape of the support that we've been given, that we've chosen. And again, feel how the air in the room around you, spacious, formless, broad, open, is reflected in your chest, your belly, your hips, maybe your throat, your palms. When we feel a lack or limitation, all that's really happened is we've momentarily, temporarily forgotten to be grateful. The gratitude brings a sense of enoughness. If there's something to be grateful for, then there must be enough. See if you can open your heart to that. Not through effort, but through allowing, through opening and inviting in. Feel the turned up palms as receptive, open, ready to receive. But really, it is only empty hands that can receive. Hands that are full or closed are not receptive. Make your whole body like a soft, open, receptive palm. Then just notice what flows to you. I love this pose because the heart is lifted. In some ways, and depending on how you've taken your support, it might be the highest point in your body. Which means that whatever is flowing to us is hitting the heart first. And if we imagine that energy follows the same rules as physical objects like gravity, that means all the rest of the energy that's flowing through our bodies has passed through the heart first. We might know that the limits of where we think we can love, the very limits of our ability for kindness or patience or giving, are not learned when times are plentiful. They are learned when times are lean. They are learned when relationships are challenging. When you find a limit, when you are pushed to your limit, so to speak, see if you can imagine loving past that limit, giving past that limit, receiving past that limit. Just imagine it. Get clear on your boundary, and then imagine past it. about 5 to 7 more breaths here. If you want to play with the limitations of your breath, again, feel free to take that option. Otherwise, just allow the breath to be very slow and full. Depending on how you've set yourself up, it might be easiest to draw knees back together, soles of the feet to the floor. It might be easiest to press your way up with your arms. It might be easiest to roll to your side. We'll find your way off of our support so that we can set up for one last shape before we find our resting pose for the evening. So we're going to find child's pose. We've taken a really open position this way. Now we want to look inward and see if we can see past the limit of our own self-knowledge. I'm full of good metaphors there. I feel like I'm taking you guys on a Middle-earth quest tonight into the dark caves of your souls. If you have a rolled blanket still, perhaps you use that for your last, to support your knees. That might be useful towards the top of the mat. There's several ways to take child's pose. If you're comfortable for long periods of time in an unsupported child's pose, you don't have to use props. I would recommend it just because we're taking the pose for a few minutes. I have learned lately that I really love having a block underneath my hips. A bolster could also serve this purpose, again, depending on the size and shape of your body, different levels of comfort in different poses. I've also discovered I like a block under my forehead sometimes. The blanket roll I'm just using to support my wrist. So this is one option. You probably know several others. Maybe the bolster is here, maybe there's no props at all, but feel free to experiment a little bit to see maybe where the limits of, maybe you've only been using your props in a limited way. We can imagine a new way to use the tools that you already have. Arms can be forward, like I'm using my blanket for my wrists. They can also come alongside the body where wrists are near to the ankles and shoulders just kind of fall over the thighs. So again, take a moment to find the variation that works best for you. Perhaps in whatever position you've chosen, it might be possible to draw the chin a little bit more in towards the chest so that the gaze, even with the eyes closed, is a little bit more inward. As you find your stillness in this pose, just for the briefest of moments, open your physical eyes and just notice how limited your vision of the room or space around you is with our heads down. Then maybe close the eyes and draw your senses to the other senses. Maybe you can hear the space around you. Again, just maybe listening to the way that the sound of your breath is moving in the room. Maybe your air conditioning is on or there's an animal walking through the room. Just notice the dimensions of the room, not by sight. But by enforcing this sort of limited sight, we enhance our other senses. Maybe you can feel the temperature of the room or where there might be air moving. Maybe you can feel the solidness of the floor, and again, how that is absorbed into the stillness and steadiness of your body. Maybe you feel the space between your back and the ceiling, and how the spaciousness there is reflected in that broad, curved, arched back. Now that we've imagined past some of our physical limits, allow your vision to now be focused inward on the heart. Are there areas of the heart that you had determined were off limits, you didn't want to look at, you didn't want to feel. Those two are limitations that invite us into creativity, invite us into novel ways of seeing, and invite us into Pratipaksha Bhavana. As you look into your own heart, are there moments that have buried themselves there in a way? Maybe somebody that is no longer in your life, or someone that you miss. Are those limits of the body, limits of the spirit, limits of the heart, are those opportunities to remember that person differently, in a new way? And finally, gazing inward at what we perceive our own limits to be. Whether it's financial or talent or whatever it is, whatever we might see within ourselves as something that we are limited in or lacking in some way. Imagine the feeling of being abundant in that area. Not that you are, or not that by magically thinking it will appear in your life, but just see if you can imagine past that limitation. Just as a practice, just as an exercise. To be a free person is to be without limits. And to be on the path to freedom is to imagine yourself past limitation, past any kind of confinement. Maybe just ponder this inner vision of the self for another 5 to 7 breaths. When it's time to come out, before you rise, gently open your eyes again and just notice what's in your periphery. Bring your hands down underneath your shoulders and press your way up, and just kind of give yourself a moment, sitting back either on your heels or on your support. Just kind of turn the neck side to side, kind of look around the room, look up and down. Kind of taking in all the sensory information that we can. And then we're going to set our props aside or rearrange our props to find our final resting shape. So many ways that we can take that final shape. We'll be in that for about 10 minutes or so. So make sure you put in the work to make it a very comfortable, relaxing, and undistracting 10 minutes. Highly recommend that same Shavasana, whatever you took at the beginning of class, just kind of some kind of flat shape, maybe supported, maybe unsupported, or if you don't want to lie on your flat on your back, maybe taking a legs up the wall or legs up the couch, or building that little Stonehenge with your blocks and your bolster support to lift the feet. We do want to sort of feel as much connection either to the floor or to something solid below the body. We're going to see about, again, finding those boundaries and edges as you settle in, as you find your way into stillness. Begin to find those borders, boundaries, and edges of your body again. As you settle deeper into stillness, feel how there is still motion and flow in the body, the breath, the blood, anything that might be moving through your digestive system. Just feel all the movement and aliveness and awareness that is happening even inside that limitation of stillness. The limbs are still. Ideally, the face is soft and relaxed, the hands and feet also open and soft. And yet, in our Shavasana, this corpse pose, feel the aliveness. Feel all the places in you that are aware, alert, awake, and active. as you feel your breath flowing, being received by the body and given by the body. Feel how the body is sort of a limited object, has its boundaries. But with the breath constantly moving, there is always an opening. Either the nostrils or the mouth is open in some way to receive this breath and to release this breath. If there is anything alive and holy and sacred within us, it is that moving breath. And we have a life in our dreams that does not include the body. As our consciousness is experiencing all kinds of scenarios that define sometimes who we are, give us pre-knowledge of something or help us to process a certain kind of memory in our dreams. And the body is uninvolved, it is asleep, but the mind or the self is still awake. There are all kinds of limitations that we've simply accepted for what they are. But when we become clear about what those limits are, we can begin again to see past them. So feel how you are bigger than your body. Feel how your awareness, your consciousness is bigger than your brain or even your mind. Begin to feel the qualities of the moving forms of this world, the gunas, moving within you and all around you. Feel yourself allowing that flow to pass through you. We don't always get to direct that current of energy. The idea is to learn to move with it, to let go of our resistance, to let go of the idea of limits and begin to move into our wholeness where we are bigger than our bodies, bigger than our minds, connected to everything. Feel again that breath moving through you, connecting you to countless other human beings, countless other plants and animals. That same breath is shared. Begin to find very small, subtle opening and lengthening movements in your body. Maybe your fingers and toes stretch out or your palms open a bit more. Maybe your hands and feet slide a little further away from your body. Begin to open, begin to expand. Begin to imagine pushing your energetic body or your awareness and your ability to perceive past the boundary of your skin. Just kind of feel or soak in that feeling for a few rounds of breath. Likewise, inside this supposedly limited frame of our body, our bones and our skin and muscles, as you reach out into that space, as you reach out into the infinite, start to pull everything inward towards your center. And however unlikely it might seem, that everything that exists is already within us. It is within our consciousness. It is within our cells. It is within the information that makes up our body. Hold that within. Feel how large and big you are. You are made of stardust. And every atom in your body was forged in the furnace of the sun. Just feel the connection to everything. Hold that within you. And maybe roll to your side. Take a few breaths to ground yourself back on this planet and in this body. And press your way past the limitation of gravity back to an upright seat. Let your body merge to the floor through the sitting bones, legs, and feet. Let your body merge to the air and space around you as you open your heart and lift your crown upward. There is the individual self and there is the cosmic self. And they are both identified with that same word, self. So maybe as each palm comes together, we imagine those two selves merging as one self and pulling that into our heart center, knowing that at the core of our being, at the heart, at the essence of who we are limitless, we are unbound, we are free, and we are one. Let all of our actions and all of our study, all of our work be in service in some way of this goal of wholeness or oneness. So we close our practice with this prayer. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy, healthy, safe, and free. Namaste.